Welcome to the D2 Baseball Podcast, your top source for all things D2 Baseball. Before we jump into today's episode, I've got some exciting news. Are you looking to reach a passionate, engaged audience? We're now offering ad spots on our podcast. By advertising with us, you'll connect with thousands of dedicated D2 baseball fans, including players, coaches, and avid supporters. Here's why you should consider partnering with us. Targeted reach. Engage a specific audience that loves D2 baseball. High engagement. Our listeners are loyal and tuned in regularly. Affordable rates. Competitive pricing for all budgets. Flexible formats. Choose from pre-roll, mid-roll, or post-roll ads. Interested? Email us at diviibaseball@gmail.com to learn more and secure your spot. Let's hit it out of the park together. Thanks for considering this opportunity. Now, let's get to today's episode of the D2 Baseball Podcast.
Welcome into another Division II Baseball Podcast. I'm Will Connerly. He's Robert Fry, and we're joined alongside Dave Therneau today, head coach at Embry-Riddle, and being brought back there to take over the program. We're excited to talk to Dave today as we continue our series on coaching changes in Division II baseball. Dave, thanks so much for your time. Tell us about the transition to now taking over as head coach at Embry-Riddle and coming back to a place you're familiar with.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm being candid, Coach Stiegel, the previous head coach, I'm sure you know, and I and his brother came into this program together in 2007. So there's a history there. And then there's a history before that. Coach Stiegel and I played together in professional baseball. And I just say that to say, it was kind of a A-B situation, if that makes sense. Both of us had just ultimate trust in one another about decisions, and all three of us, for that matter, just decisions and stuff was just the atmosphere was a little bit different than a power hierarchy here, if that makes sense. So when you talk about transition, the players see that, so they had trust, and it was just easy is not the word, but I would say easier transition and familiarity, because I was doing so many things, without the title and not necessarily needing it. Trust me, if Randy had something he had to go do, and he wasn't going to be able to be at practice or a game or anything, there was just never missing a beat kind of thing there. It's just like, hey, you got to run practice today and get a practice plan together and instruct and do that with, our philosophies in mind. And, it just really wasn't as difficult as, maybe someone would think. I think a new person coming in here, that's probably a different conversation. It's just it's kind of a shock to the system, I would say. So that's been nice. Now, obviously, the personal transition, now everything's my fault. I'm just kidding about that. But there's just a lot of things that were on my plate I had to, now take responsibility for and do, where maybe previously I was in a supportive capacity of that. Those were discussions, but ultimately it comes down to Randy had to do blank, and then that's now Dave has to do blank. So it's been a far more challenging personally, not in a bad way at all. I don't mean that at all. Just from a busy standpoint, responsibility standpoint, far more challenging there than what it's been for these players in this program.
And Coach, a little bit of your background. You started your coaching career with Embry-Riddle, back in 2007. You leave for a couple, for about 7 years at Stetson, and then you come back as the pitching coach around January of 2023. Did you expect that you would be the head coach less than a year later?
No, of course not. Again, if we're being transparent here, what we did collectively over the years, and again, you just removed my hiatus from Stetson with going to 7 out of 8 World Series. When we took over this program at the NAIA level. Now, my time at Stetson, this program went through a lot that a lot of people did. The COVIDs, the things that have happened that we all know. They went through a lot. But if I'm being transparent, I really thought this is where Randy would retire, to be honest with you. And but how quickly things can change. I knew I didn't. I just knew I loved it here, and at that time, that's what I needed. I didn't know what was next, or how long I'd be here, or what that would look like. But again, I have such an affection for this place that coming back and staying in baseball is what I needed at that time, just to be happy again. And so. But to answer your question, absolutely not. I thought he would be here for a long time. I know this, that this was a family, personal decision for him to move on and do something different. That's what he could write his own ticket to when and if he wanted to leave here. You know what I mean? Because of what he's done in this uniform. So, no, I did not think so.
And coming off the season that Embry-Riddle had, having success within the Sunshine State Conference and getting to the postseason as well, how do you plan to now build upon what you guys did this past season?
Well, I think goals. We'd be crazy if we're having this conversation this time last year if we thought, we would have made it super regional. If we're just being honest with our players and ourselves, our goals were to win 30 games and be in the conversation for regional. That was what our goals were, and that's what we fought to do, because the transition into Division II hasn't gone as well as expected here. Just being honest, we have a high expectation around here, and that's it. That's all. That's what I want to set the expectation, but we're in the toughest league in the country. There's no weekends off. So to sit here and go, we're talking about super regionals and World Series. We want to do those things. We do. And that'll be, a kind of a bigger goal, but let's work at being in a regional conversation every year. Okay. If we had a conference tournament, we don't, but it would be about like lining up ourselves to make some noise there to what? To be in a regional conversation every year. That's what we want to do. We want to be consistent regional appearances and then reset the season at that time. Okay. Now what do? We got to go win a tournament, and that's what we did. We won a tournament. We played well. We win a tournament. Okay. Now, we got the Tampa draw let's be honest. That's a tough, we're not scared of it. We're not, we want to just be in that conversation and fight for that and that consistency in this program to just get back to postseasons. And, that's what, so I use the analogy, and these players will laugh about it, but I just told them last year, I said, listen, and I was able to get the floor a lot, but I said, we just want a chip in a chair. And they're like, what? What does that mean? I said, well, as long as you have a chip at the poker table and you got a chair, you got a shot. That's what we, kind of lived by last year. Like, let's just be in the conversation. Let's have an opportunity, and then let's consistently build this thing to where we're just always in that conversation. It's not going to go our way every year, especially when you're in the toughest league in the country at any level, it's, you could have an unfortunate injury or an unfortunate thing happen, which, I mean, shoot, we went through a ton of adversity last year. It was just a different makeup group, we were able to overcome those things. You're not going to have that every year, but it's certainly beat on that door is the goals.
And something we definitely thought last year, while we were working through our post stuff, we originally thought you were going to go to Tampa for the regional and Lee was going to take that 3 seed, but you guys get the 3 seed, end up going in the supers, ultimately, playing Tampa to a full 3 games. But, speaking of that conference, the Sunshine State Conference, one of the, most recognized Division II conferences in baseball, being able to see that kind of talent week in and week out, how does that help you in terms of recruiting and development to be able to say, hey, like, here's what we need to do to match this kind of level of play?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, it's hard because it's, there's so many players. If we're being all honest, I mean, the majority of players that we're all getting are Florida kids. Now we have our exceptions. We have, some people from out of state, D1 transfer, whatever, especially with the portal now. But there's just so many options, for Florida kids down here to go to so many, different schools at all levels, by the way. We got Division I, NAI, JUCO. It's just a lot of places, to play down here. So the recruiting's very, very competitive, and that will never change. So then it becomes, what can you provide? And this isn't what I'm saying is not against any other school because I don't know that, but I just know what we can provide. We have great facilities, like our infrastructure. Again, I've been at a Division I, and this is very similar, if not better. It's like playing at a mid-major Division I here, from a facility and infrastructure and all that standpoint. Meanwhile, what an education you get, and that's your sale. And you're just not going to get everybody. There's going to be things that take precedent for a kid, and that's never going to change. Like, hey, kid wants to get drafted. I think I can get drafted better at X school, and it's just really hard to talk them out of that, and okay, I understand, but it's never going to change the competitiveness of recruiting down here. Is never going to change. It's constant, but there's, without question, I think, someone understanding that they know we can get to a super regional and potential World Series appearance will factor in. I mean, it's been proven that we can at least knock on that door. We got to win a different way, and players know that, and that's what it was kind of culmination of that. Last year, so many of those kids, a lot of people don't know. There was a lot of kids on that team that stuck around through. Now, COVID season shut down in 20. Our administration decided not to play in 21. I don't know if you guys know that. So 2 years of crippling that some of those kids on that team stuck around for. So it was just, makeup of kids off the charts that, chose to stick around. But that's a little bit of a tangent. The recruiting is always going to be, tough down here. You just sell the school, what can be provided, and what a special place this is to play. It doesn't mean nowhere else is it, but it is a great place to play.
And as part of that recruiting pitch as well, something you've brought up, the conference itself being the best in the country, saying, hey, you're going to get an opportunity to go up against some of the best players in the nation. And I think when we just say that, for people that don't know much about Division II baseball, and you have great perspective on that, the Sunshine State Conference, I mean, guys on Friday and Saturday in that league are pretty comparable. I would love your thoughts on this to some mid-major Division I guys that are throwing certain times. What are your thoughts on that? And just overall, is that an added element to the recruiting pitch as well, saying you do get to play against some of the best players in the nation and guys do go on to the next level from here?
Yeah, I think the history of our program, matters. We got 3 big leaguers that some Division II kids don't have. And, I've been fortunate enough to coach all of them. It's something that can be done here. So that dream's not closed here. Now, what I do know is if you want to play after this and, think, number one, I make sure they know in the recruiting process, like, hey, I was fortunate enough to live that dream too, personally, but you better understand that what your percentages are. I'm not trying to, crush your dreams or anything, but let's deal with reality. It's like, it's 1% of 1%, 1% of college baseball players get the chance and 1% of those make it, right? So you want those dreams, they can happen here. But I do know you have to play for that to happen. Like, that's no secret. So, going to sit behind, the blue chipper somewhere isn't going to get you those opportunities. You have to play, you have to produce, you have to put up numbers, you have to be seen. And that's what can happen here, not just Embry-Riddle, but that can happen at this level. And reminder, our 3 big leaguers were from the NAI days. So it can be where you're at is not the stamp. It's not like, okay, oh shoot, I got to go to this school and my career's over. No, the jobs of the scouts to find the guys and project whether they can, be someone at that level, whether they can consistently and what they can do and so on and so forth, So it's just the playing time thing. I think kids just need to understand, and that dynamic at that level, I don't know how much you guys follow, is changing even more. Everybody thought it was just the transfer portal. Well, it's getting even more cloudy, with the roster spots and the scholarships and stuff. What's that going to do? Like, I mean, to a kid, like, listen, you should want to play and set yourself up for your best life after your sport. That's an unbelievable opportunity at this level. I saw so many great players, believe me, at the Division I level that just they weren't playing. But it just meant so much to them to be there. And I get it, I understand, but man, do you want to play? Like, do you want to develop? So that's a big difference here.
And Coach, you brought it up a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about kind of your playing career and how it relates now today. You start at Navarro Junior College, you go to Texas Tech, then you finish out at NAIA Bellevue. In that experience, how can that help you with today's landscape of college baseball, where more people, more kids are more likely to, enter into the portal or go to different schools, year by year?
Yeah, and this was the one I can speak to very well, which is, I was playing at a Division I. I was at the kind of the pinnacle, and I won't get into the reasons why I left, but I just want to make sure it's not looked at wrong. It wasn't, I didn't do anything, and it wasn't my grades, it wasn't any of that stuff. It was a scholarship mistake. So anyway, but making that move from there to going to an NAIA school and producing at a high level was the smartest thing I ever did. Because I did have dreams and aspirations of playing pro ball. I wanted to do that. I was very realistic, though. I was like, okay, if this doesn't happen, these are things I can't get in the mind of a scout. But I had a very, very good year in the starting rotation at a Division I school that was ranked number 1 in the country, and I did not get drafted at all. I didn't get the opportunity. So I just found it wise for me. What had happened was the summer after that year at Texas Tech, I spent in the Jayhawk League in the Midwest. Those scouts were very, very interested. Let's put it that way. So I didn't care necessarily the level of school. My goal was to get in that region for some people that got their eyes on me and liked me. So that's what I did. It was the best move I ever made. And it's crazy how it works, how life works sometimes, because I lived there for 10 years after. I loved the place. It was just, and I still have an affection for the place, and I follow them very closely. The coaches I'm very close with. You know, I'm a very proud alumni of that place. And I was coming from, you know, number 1 in the country. Hey, you know, the Big 12 champions. And it was still, I'm just saying it could happen anywhere. And I'm a testament to that. I don't just think about that change of course of my life that could have been if I never got the chance to play pro ball. You know, do I even continue on? Am I in some sales job somewhere? You know, you just never know. But things can happen good for you anywhere at any level.
And I know we touched on last season, the record-setting year you guys had at the Division II level, and with you working with the pitchers, having that background as a player and a coach, I remember what was really striking to me is the run that Dylan Moran went on last year for a little bit. He had back-to-back complete games. It felt like he was striking out the world, and it kind of happened in the middle of the year, kind of toward the end of the year. What kind of clicked for him in your eyes for a younger arm to start figuring it out toward the latter half of his redshirt sophomore season?
Yeah, you know, he's a great story. The first thing that needs to be understood is what was inside this kid. You know, I don't call him a man yet. I guess I better now, but what was inside this kid that maybe wasn't there when I got back, if that makes sense. So instilling some toughness and painting a picture for his development. You know, he kind of got, so I'll just be honest about it. And I think if Dylan were sitting right next to me right now, we would laugh about this. When I got back, I was coming off injury, you could barely throw an inning. And, you know, as we all know, sometimes you're just like, oh, I don't feel great, you know. So long story short, he was nowhere near as physically conditioned as he turned out to be, if that makes sense. He had worked his tail off to build his conditioning. Side effect of that, now that was January of 23. So think about how long that kind of took to build and develop. He did the throwing program, you know, he checked off everybody, you know what I mean? He did it to the T. And he understood as after we met, and I said, this is what I think. And this is what has worked with some of the guys I did in the past. Here's why we need to do this and that and the other. He's like, yes, sir, we got it. And he checked off those boxes. Now, you fast forward, if you would have thought, I wouldn't have thought. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say I would have. But I do think it's a product of someone's preparation. You know, he worked his tail off. He was prepared. Arm was conditioned. His body was in great condition. Things that he had worked at so hard that that confidence comes with that, you know, and he would just go out and he thought he was the best player on the field. And he was wrong at times. And that's what I tell these guys, just think you're the best player on the field and just be wrong. And boy, like, yeah, that back end run, he just put us on his back, if I'm being honest. Because we were very confident on Friday night, and then we had some guys struggle behind that. So without that, we were, big trouble. But it's just a testament to the kid buying into a philosophy, committing to it, and never wavering, and then gets to reap the benefits on the back end. He even came in relief on short rest and gave us 4 or 5 in the regional, whatever that was, because that's a all hands on deck time, and his teammates were very confident in him, but they're the ones that asked that question: can you come back and give us some? He's like, yes. And what a competitor, man. And that was not the maturity and that growth and I told him this at the end of it. I said, how far have we come since January 23? When my first introduction to Dylan Moran, I wanted to rip his head off. And again, I'm not saying things behind his back here. He would tell you the same thing. And I was not happy at all with him, but like I said to him, man, how far have we come? So, special kid.
And, speaking of special kid and someone who, will likely make a big impact for the 25 season, we got to talk about a guy who kind of served as a hybrid role for you guys, mostly out of the pen, but had a few starts. Also, pitched really well against Tampa in that super regional. We got to talk about Max Meyer and his impact and what you anticipate he will do in 2025.
I think his value, if I'm just answering the question directly, is on the back end. I've was the most successful groups I've had have been built from the back forward. If that makes sense. Because I always tell these guys, and there's different philosophies. Hey, my best arm's got to start. I get that. I've just always built from the back forward because you got to be able to hand it. How many people are throwing complete games every night? I mean, you got to be able to hand it to somebody. So that's his biggest value. And to be honest with you, when we started him a couple of times last year out of panic necessity, we're like, all right, our best arm has to start this game. It didn't go that well. He's just better off in a high leverage, competitive, pressurized atmosphere because that kid's makeup is special, and he's another guy that, follows the program. Him and another guy and Moran, I would say, check the best boxes off as far as how, because I always tell them, man, and I really believe this in all levels of baseball. Sometimes it's not, because there's different ways to skin a cat. Everybody's got a different philosophy and program for this, that, and the other. Everybody's different because it's product of what they've been taught and what they believe in, and that's theirs. So I always tell them it's not really what we do, although I have reasons, and this is what we're going to, this is how we're going to do things. I have my reasons, but it's the intensity and attitude with which you do it that is the changer. And that's what those dudes do. If I can explain it a little better, is the intensity and the way they attack their workday. And it's, okay, what do you got for us today, coach? All right. And I'll lay it all out. This is what we're doing today. Now I do it weekly. So I'm like, this is what your week looks like. And you're doing all this. And they attack those things with the right attitude and intensity is what I'm saying. And Max is that way. He's obviously going to be key for us. So he's good. I mean, he's a guy that's going to be in the conversation for the next level, for sure. Not just statistically, but stuff wise. His stuff's just really, really good. Probably our best pure stuff guy on the staff last year and this year.
And that has to be exciting, getting both of those guys to come back on the squad. And one thing that's exciting for at least Robert and myself is that you guys already do have that 2025 roster up. And looking at that, you have some exciting transfers as well that are joining the program. Are there any that you'd like to talk about that you're excited to see this coming season?
Yeah, I mean, I have a history with one of our arms that I think can be really good. He needs a good fall. He needs to get some confidence and understanding back. But I've seen it. I've seen it electric because I recruited him when I was in Stetson. He ended up going to UCF. And I saw he pitched against us his freshman year, and it was it was electric. Now he's had some injuries since then, so for me to sit here and tell you it's electric right this second, no. But can we tap into that? If we do, we got a special dude. Now he's going to help us as is right now, but we're just really working to get his arm strength and his kind of his body back and his movements back and just get back to what it was, and then let's see what it is. That's Zach Bennett out of UCF. Got a couple of transfers, outfielders that I'm excited about. One being a kid from Mercer, named Max Cops. When you watch the workout, man, it's like, what the heck is this? But in this game, you have to hit. You can't just. We don't win games in BP, and that's not a knock at him at all. I don't mean that, but we just got to see how it equates, because his action was limited, but the skill set's real. His action was limited at Mercer, but I'm excited about him. He's a physical freak. We got a D3 transfer that has been really, really impressive. He had real success at that level. And it's not to diminish that level, but it's just not the consistent competition that we have spoke about today on every weekend in this conference. And he may transition well, but again, he's a big physical dude. Like, that's two dudes we added extreme physicality. That kid's name's Pena, by the way, Malachi. He had success at Tufts. And then, we got a couple of pieces here and there, middle infielder that I'm super excited about from a defensive standpoint, and we'll see what the back comes. I have a history with him, the Master Mural kid. I recruited his older brother to Stetson. So anyway, these guys are out there, but ultimately you got to show up and play and see what that looks like.
And Coach, I wanted to ask you this personally, as someone with a more of an analytical background in baseball. In today's age where there is a lot more use of data in analytics, but then there's also this need for old school as well. How do you go about meshing, the new school age versus the old school into like a cohesive, conjunction?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I feel like it's 2018 again, because after, we led the country in pitching under an old school system. It was everybody was wanting to talk to me and find the catch. It wasn't a catch. The guys believed in it. And now, one, there's a couple things about analytics at this level is, one is what exactly is available to you. We're not having this conversation at University of Florida. No knock to them, but they have more resources to get whatever they want. We don't really have that here. So what's available to you? What information are you getting? Okay. And then once you get that information, what do you do with that? So I had some of that data, in 18, and I'll be candid in that I made fractions of that available to them. So at the end of the day, so here's what I say. The analytics absolutely is a plus, but it's not new. Does that make sense? It's just we have better technology to talk about it. So as an example, as a player, As an example, we have a way to identify four-seam ride and some of those things that people talk about that we used to be able to see in how someone threw. You want to talk about someone's spin rate. I can sit in the dugout and go, dude, that guy's breaking balls, has a high spin rate. I can tell that stuff. That stuff's been around for years. It's just a little bit more hard numbers now, and we can take that. So it's a complementary piece without a doubt. But the old school piece, I guess, of who I am and what I believe firmly is that at the end of the day, through all that, you got to answer the bell and be able to pitch. You have to answer the bell and be able to hit. Like your launch angles and stuff, those just give you, areas of like to work on, no doubt. Like, what's the exit velo? I got to get stronger. There's no doubt. There's not a question about that. But at the end of the day, that bell has to be answered. You gotta get up and you gotta get somebody out. And so I guess the target on my back has been, old school, and yes, I'm happy to wear that. But that's more the old school part of me is the pitchability stuff. And when you talk about, I was fortunate enough, I had Logan Gilbert, and Logan came in as the rawest arm you guys could ever fathom. You may not believe that, doesn't matter, but he's just kind of a stock upper 80s guy. Now, when you talk about when he left, the arm strength was developed. This guy's throwing mid to upper 90s, but look at his junior year numbers: 165 punch outs to like 40. So look at his numbers now. He learned that early on about how important being competitive in zone and command and this stuff we worked on constantly, how important that was. Now we get a guy that develops big league stuff with that. It's a great deal. That's the old school. You get a guy that just checks all those analytic boxes, throws 100 with this much run and vertical ride and whatever that stuff is, and he throws it in the stands every time. Useless, and that's the old school piece of it. So that's my high horse. The of my teachings that get kind of a mislabel, because we've all had players like this. Until you can throw the ball over the plate competitively, your spin rates and your velos and it just doesn't matter. It doesn't.
Really appreciate that question, Robert, and that answer, Dave, because it makes me think. I haven't heard that before, like analytics aren't new, right? Because we think about them being new, but it's like, hey, there were launch angles before, but now they can be measured. And I love how you brought up the fact that all of that information is not always good for the player. You, as a coach, have to understand and decide what information that you have access to now is going to be most helpful to the player as well. I thought that was really cool to hear your answer from the perspective of the fact that you have had a lot of success in your career as a pitching coach and got that recognition for guys to develop and go on to the next level and have success. My final question for you is, and I know I brought it up at the beginning in terms of the transition, but I do wonder, as head coach, is that going to change how often you work with the pitchers compared to the rest of the team?
Daily, I'll answer this one quick and easy. So I feel strongly I've hired right. And what that means is I hired someone similar to me. What the consumption is oftentimes in the pitching arena is daily schedules and details. That if I can get someone to do that, which I think I've hired right to do that, I will always impart what I know and my knowledge. I'm not pawning that off. I'm not doing that, but it is very difficult to be with them on a daily basis while running a team the way you want to run it. It's just hard. I learned that from Coach Dunn, Pete Dunn, legend, ABCA Hall of Famer, like a dad to me. And, some people I knew in the game that were Division I coaches that kind of had pitching backgrounds, became head coaches, and they just, man, it doesn't work. But I also believe that from the jump, So basically, I think I've hired right, and I will always have my hands on that. I think it would be crazy to not impart what you see and what you feel and all that. And then the throwing program that I have, the similarities were there with me and who I've hired to where they can administer it on a daily basis. That makes sense.
That makes perfect sense, Coach. And, we're excited for it. We're excited to see how Embry-Riddle will fare here in 2025. But the final question I have for you is, since you began your coaching career, who have been mentors or who has helped you get to where you are today?
Okay. My influences are significant. Skip Johnson was my junior college coach, who's the head coach at OU. Tim Tadlock is the head coach at Texas Tech. Also, him and Skip both played at my high school. So early influences with those guys, and how you want to talk about tough dudes and just, grinding. They instilled that in me, like it's the way I played the game, it was just, hard and all that through them and toughness. Then I go on to play for Larry Hayes, who's a Hall of Famer. Again, this was more of a toughness thing than anything. And then just, being hired by Pete Dunn was a huge influence. These are all what you guys would call old school guys. But that old school was toughness and work ethic and mental toughness and just playing hard. So, I think those are my biggest influences. I had influences in pro ball without a doubt. A guy named Phil Wellman. Do you guys know that name? I'm about to paint the picture for you. It was the guy that crawled behind the mound and threw the rosin bag at the umpire.
Yep.
I played for that guy. That was one of my biggest influences in pro ball because he was a player's guy. He was tough. He was a whack job, no question, but such a great baseball man. And he taught me how to be professional, but, you see he's a little out there, but it was just – anyway, the number of influences, I'm very lucky. Most of them were as players more than coaches. My coaching influences often come from people that have done it. I cross sport. You know what I mean? Like our basketball coach here at Embry-Riddle is one of the biggest mentors because he's been doing it for so long. He's an absolute legend. I encourage you guys to look him up. But if you don't know who he is, I mean, why wouldn't I lean on that, So influences all different directions, but those are my baseball influences.
That's awesome, Coach. Really appreciate you taking time to join us today and share your experiences. We're really thrilled to see what the program is going to look like. And again, thank you for taking the time to allow us to talk to you today.
No worries, man. I appreciate you guys reaching out. Looking forward to it.
And that is Dave Therneau, head coach at Embry-Riddle.